I just want to say that there's a stream going on right now as you watch this that is me reading every single Yu-Gi-Oh card in existence. Yes, the anime ones. Yes, the Rush ones. Yes, it's going to be absolutely a pain, and that's going to be what I'm going to be doing on stream until it's done. You can pay me to reset it, so this might go on for 4 days, for a week, for an entire year. I don't know. All I know is that it's going to be fun. So check out the Twitch, it's in the description, and absolutely enjoy the video.
Well, let's start off with the most boring and linear deck that Duel Links probably has ever seen. Amazon S were very good, and are still rogue today because Princess is a wonderful card that allows you to search Onslaught, and Onslaught is an unfair card that people hate in Duel Links like we hate Mystic Mine in the current trading card game. Yes, imagine it is real, do not question it. You really just use Onslaught and hope for the best, there's not much else to it. You can just go on ahead and summon Queen, sit on it, attack until you win, that's all you really need to do. If you couldn't tell, this is probably the only deck on the list I actively don't like, but trust me, it only gets better from here. I may be cheating with this one, but Sylvan's only ever did anything with Soul Charge anyway, so I'm gonna count it for the list. You just sit on the Komu Shrumo, because it has a wide, fat ass, and makes your entire deck work from a huge 5-card excavation. You have big beaters in the way of Gigaplant and the big Shinra tree, and Martial Leaf is used to pop monsters, which is such a big deal that even a year later, people are trying to make offerings to the Doomed work, and it's seeing mild success when a draw phase is skipped, let alone thinking of it as just happening for free when the leaf is excavated. Rose Lever was also so good it needed to be hit along with Martial Leaf, because it hit the grave so often through excavation effects, and could spam out whatever plant you wanted in your hand, preferably the big Shinra tree. The deck died after these hits, unfortunately, which is something we know very well from our own ban list, but the time that this deck held the spotlight is still quite impressive. They could even OTK sometimes just through having big beat sticks and using Hey Trunade to make sure they were safe to attack. Sage Koya, Soul Charge, and Xyz monsters weren't even in the game, and they could still make a splash so hard that people were calling for them to be gutted, and Konami obliged. We won't be seeing that too often, as players just kind of realize that the problem cards would be hit, and that would be that. Yes, that is an attitude they have, and we have a game where Rusty Bardiche isn't banned, and people are clamoring for it to be banned on the next ban list after the last one kind of forgot it existed. Oh, and by the way, limit Saryuja! This is probably the oldest deck on the whole list, as this was the first meta deck Duel Links ever really had. Relinquished was good primarily because of the fact that the only searchers in the game up to this point were Sonic Bird and Senju, and that was enough to make Relinquished an incredibly powerful monster that you could summon first turn most of the time. Especially since this deck was so good that the skill used with it, Switcheroo, had to be nerfed from a card trader to a card trader upon life point loss, which players seem to rejoice about. Relinquished was so hard to get rid of, especially since you had Mirror Wall and Enemy Controller at this point, and they started being played in just about everything. This was the deck that started Enemy Controller's reign. The mirror match came down to activating Enemy Controller to steal an opponent's Relinquished, steal one of their own monsters, and proceed to win from that card advantage alone. Interdimensional Matter Transporter was also a tech option to protect Relinquished and get rid of the equip just so you could use the effect again. Simple, but also one of the first Tier 1 decks, and that just sounds so childish in our meta. Duel Links was a simpler time, and it's only gotten crazier and more fun from here. The best spell and trap removal in the game, so good they made an entire deck based around it. Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys is a heavy storm on regeneration, and that was just too much to handle when Fire Kings make that effect work way more often than you would ever think. Fire Kings in and of themselves are such good beatsticks for their level anyway with 1800 attack, and Barong helps to search, so they were just really good cards to use anyway. This deck could beat Red Eye's Zombie even, just because Nephthys was big and you could beat over the dragon. The deck still had consistency issues, so some people didn't play Beatdown but instead Restart, giving them an entirely new hand to work with at the start of the game. This was one of the best decks to ladder with, mainly because it had a good matchup against Red Eyes when you had the Beatdown ability, and Red Eyes was so expensive anyway that not many people played it, and that was the only really good matchup, comparatively, for Heavy Storm on Legs the deck. All of this isn't even mentioning how the rituals have been seeing some amount of play with Yubel. We're only talking about the deck that just uses Heavy Storm on Legs as their only real monster from the early days. We all know the concept of a boss monster, but this is certainly one I forgot about from the earlier days of the Duel Links meta. Glad Beasts without Geysaris. That should be enough to make you question this deck, but here it is. It isn't the craziest deck on this list by a wide margin, nor is it the most unbelievable. But it's missing the best card in the deck, so what could it do? Well, Gladiator Beast still had Bestiari and Laquari, cards that you run multiples of in every format that you could, and they were a control deck because of the lack of Test Tiger and easy effect proccing. This was supplemented by the skill Balance, which helps when your Glad Beast deck only runs 7 or 8 monsters. They played more like Boojans than actual Glad Beasts we saw tearing up the meta around the 2008 mark. You'd summon a Glad Beast, sit on it, hope your opponent triggered Battle Traps so you could use their effects, stall until you could get enough momentum to summon the big finisher of the deck, which would actually be Neurokius, the Glad Beast that I've only seen relevancy in the anime-only Gladiator Beast FTK, because it's the only real generic Glad Beast fusion, not needing a specific Gladiator Beast to make, or a specific level of Gladiator Beasts to make, it's just 3 of them. You could also summon Heraklinos, but this came rarely as the deck couldn't spam out monsters as reliably. When you did summon him out, however, you basically won the game because of how good of a control card it was for stopping anything your opponent wanted to do off of a discard effect. The important matchups to note were that Glad Beasts could beat Burn pretty well, but struggled against Cyber Angels, a tier 0 deck at the time, so really no one had a winning matchup against them anyway. If Red Eye Zombie didn't have anti-magic arrows, Glad Beast had a favored matchup there as well, and that's pretty important when it's one of the most relevant decks ever made for the game. Don't worry, we'll get to that, but for now, let's just know that Glad Beast never even needed Gyzaris. It was completely unneeded, no use for it, bad card, bye-bye. When you say a Lamau, do you ever feel threatened? Well, for a while, Duel Links players dreaded that sacred phrase. Imagine a world where not only did A counters matter, but they were relevant to a point where Alien Grey and Alien Soldier were staples that allowed you to always resolve their effects. The attack drop from A counters was huge, and if you ever needed removal, Brainwashing Beam was a tech choice that functioned quite well. That world was Duel Links. They got their newest piece of support that allowed you to spray the A counters and help the deck's consistency while also being kind of a battle trap because A counters actually mattered. And then they promptly destroyed the tournament scene as people knew it. You would run Telepath to remove spells and trap cards, which was a big deal at the time. And all of this was done without Ammonite or Cosmic Fortress, as Synchros didn't exist yet. The best part is that you would play this as Joey and run the skill Grit. That would allow you to not be OTK'd by Red Eye Zombies, and that sentence alone took a year off my life. Aliens could actually do something besides use the Cosmic Fortress to loop your field in some jank FTK combo, and that's just impressive in and of itself. The original and most powerful meme in Duel Links, to the point that its name is literally just, quote, the terrifying OTK machine, to most players. It's Kwaki Meiru. If you're giggling, you should be, because Duel Links is still making me question all of my life choices even years into the game's lifespan. The basic idea is that you use Urnite to spam out one of your negating Kwaki Meirus, use Maximus as a giant beat stick that can pop something on the field, and you can do all of this easily in one turn, leading to its legendary moniker of the terrifying OTK machine. Kwaki Meirus are actually still playable today, even with hits to the core and Maximus himself, so that should tell you how resilient this deck is, considering it may just turn out to be a deck that lasts as long as our next deck on the list, which is saying a lot. The deck doesn't have much nuance to it, as you fill your deck up with staples aside from the Kwaki Meirus you're running anyway, and it's not complicated, but it's certainly something no one from outside Duel Links would have thought anything of ever. Coming in at the bronze medal is possibly the most relevant deck in the game's short history, considering it was viable for over a year. That's pretty impressive when you consider that our game is over 30 years old, and only a handful of cards, let alone archetypes, have been relevant for a third of our game's history. That's longer than Light Sworns across all the years they were relevant, Burning Abyss never really fading away since inception, and even the general idea of Dark Synchro spamming, which isn't as much a deck as it is a concept that evolved over time from Dark Strike Fighter nuking in Main Phase 2 to Triple Omega saying, oh hi hand, bye hand. Red Eye Zombie, otherwise known as literally Enemy Controller the Deck, back when every deck still ran Enemy Controller, so that moniker means a lot, was the most consistent OTK deck of the time by a wide margin. Basically, you use Gozuki, use Red Eye's Insight or Samurai Skull instead or with them if you opened Broke, and stall until you get your Red Eyes on the field, stalling further until you can OTK with whatever your opponent has through the mighty power of Enemy Controller. If this didn't work out, you had so many pluses and so much card advantage over the opponent that there was no real way to come back from it most of the time. The interactions between the mirror match is what really sets this deck apart, simply because you wouldn't be caught dead without your Red Eye Zombie Dragon on the field and stealing your opponent's cards, which were already zombies. It got so bad that some people didn't even bother summoning Samurai Skull because it would just get stolen by an opposing Red Eyes, even if you used the beatdown skill, which allowed Red Eyes to beat over basically anything in the game and everything in the meta. Even then, anti-magic arrows would be an important card, just in case your Red Eyes swung into a wall of disruption protecting their own Red Eyes, and guess what, if you don't have the arrows, well, you just gave them another copy of their boss monster. Mirror Wall was a great counter to this deck because it activated in the damage step and didn't care about your enemy controller plays. Basically, this made for a terrifying OTK machine, on par with the last terrifying OTK machine we just covered, and trust me, that gets funnier every time I say it or think the thought. If you know this channel, you know that I love decks that win world championships. Agents won worlds and are therefore the best structure deck. Be sure to check out that video, card is on the screen right now. So it's no surprise that the deck that won the first world championship of Duel Links made it this high on the list. Only not being number one because of how crazy the top of the list is. It's a close second, mainly because can you imagine playing Toons with only one Toon Kingdom, the only real monsters being Toon Summon Skull, Dark Magician Girl, and Mermaid as tribute fodder, one Toon Table of Contents, Toon Rollback as the only real Toon Trap card, and all the while this is in a game where Nefties is the best spell and trap removal in the game? Well, no need to imagine, because this deck won the very first World Championships for Duel Links. How? Well, you could attack directly with a lot of attack, play rollback, and immediately win the game. Toon Summon Skull with Rising Energy is an OTK as well, and since this deck couldn't be targeted by the ever-present enemy controller, the only real out here was either Sphere Ebola or Curse of Anubis and Windstorm of Ataqua. And yes, this was run as a counter to Toons. Simple deck, but no one would have expected the power they had if you look at it from the viewpoint of the trading card game. I mean, you lose your Searcher, your best field spell, the continuous spell that you still run one of just to be sure of, and you don't have Toon Gemini Elf or Toon Mass Sorcerer. You know, the big ones, the really good ones that you summon to get advantage and neg your opponent. The reason Toons are a deck? Yeah, we don't need them. Duel Links, man. That's just Duel Links. Well, here's fan service that no one thought was possible. If I tell you that Neos is currently the best deck in Duel Links, and you're removed from the meta, or the game as a whole, how would you guess that this is the case? Do you think that Air Neos Turbo is making the meta based around an OTK? Is Divine Neos easy to summon and wreaks havoc? Is Rainbow Neos something that you consider? Maybe just abusing the fact that it's a normal monster and it has that Swing of Memories swag. Well, I know you don't have any earthly clue, and you will lose brain cells when I tell you it's Neos Control Steel Swarm. This absolutely terrifying deck is the combination of a bunch of factors, from every deck list running Lava Golem to summon Nova Master and just to get over everything that you can't get over normally through battle. Gale Lizard, no joke, for the same purpose of being a bigger Hane and run at 3. Steel Swarm Gira Stag to send monsters to the graveyard and be big with Scout making it possible to summon them. And then the crowning achievement in Neos Fusion being one of the best cards ever printed for the game. Right up there with Enemy Controller and Sphere Ebola. You can set up your grave with an AD Changer or a Bacon Saver, summon Brave Neos, and have Miracle Fusion to make whatever you want from there, including the Shining or Escuridão. Everything in the deck just sort of works together too well for its own good, and Duel Links has had a history of metas decided by whoever is the most creative in deck building, and I think this is the perfect way to show it. Thank you, Duel Links. You have given us memes, and you will continue to do so for decades.